Much indeed. As you say, we've got the man of the moment, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Pravin Gordhan. Minister, thanks very much for joining us. I know that it's been a busy sort of 24 hours for you. Just straight off the bat, when you were busy putting this budget together, what was the overarching idea that you had?
That we must convey to South Africa and the world that we have a credible story about 20 years of successes. 5 years in which we've weathered what we called yesterday the economic earthquake, because people tend to forget these things, that there was a very severe once-in-70-year recession that President Zuma's administration had to deal with from 2009 till now, that we have a clear sense of direction in terms of where we want to go, and finally that we have control over our finances, and that we look at our books very carefully and make sure that we sustain this country financially and move in the right direction.
And how did you manage to balance the books in such a way that there's no real increase in taxes for the individuals? Because at the end of the day, you've got a lot that you have to do, and you've got to find the money from somewhere. Where's it going to come from?
Well, that's where all of us have to apply our judgment and ask, is this the right time to increase taxes? The economy is in difficulty. Some businesses are in difficulty, not all of them. And we've got to then evaluate what's the right thing to do. Increased taxes will come sometime into the near future or in the medium term, because we've got huge responsibilities to undertake. Revamping our health system, for example, and make sure everybody gets affordable health system. And as you correctly point out, more houses to build, more support to small businesses, more support to business more generally, and above all, lifting the young people out of unemployment and despair. So you're right, we have many responsibilities, but we'll try and manage it within the current finances we have, and once we've exhausted that, we'll look beyond. But the key for us is for government, business and labor to agree, let's grow this economy so that there will be more revenue, there'll be a bigger cake for all of us to share.
All right, we'll chat a little bit about Labour in a while, but some of the reaction that's starting to come, because there's always reaction, people shouting from the sidelines. The word conservative came up quite a bit. Was that your aim?
No, I wouldn't call myself conservative by any means, maybe in my dress, but apart from that, little else. It's a responsible budget. It's one which ensures, as I said, that all of these factors are taken into account. And if conservative means that we don't do wild things or make wild claims or say impossible things that we can't deliver to our people just to earn favor and be on the right side of populist arguments, then when you're governing a country, that's not what you do. You have a wider set of responsibilities, both for the current generation but for future generations as well.
Opposition parties also made what they wanted of it. DA Shadow Minister says that you didn't do enough in terms of incentives, in terms of big things to get the economy going. Your response?
Well, with great respect, we come from very different philosophical backgrounds. For the DA and their spokesman, everything is about privatization, handover to the private sector, whereas we come from a background where there's a balance between what the private sector does and what the state does. They wouldn't hesitate to cut benefits to poor people. We are very cautious about that, because if we don't help poor people and unemployed people in South Africa, we'll find ourselves in a mess of one kind or another. So we have very different approaches, but we are spending R1 trillion. That's a lot of money, and we've balanced that money in terms of expenditure and allocation between allocations for what we call the social wage, transport, housing, education, social welfare on the one hand, and support for business. Look at our budget review. It's full of incentives. The question is, are we using them? Are we using them to increase employment? Are we using them to become more agile and competitive businesses? And business must answer that question. I believe some are, and I believe that many others must still adapt.
One leg of this equation is going to be a tight rein on government expenditure. Are you going to be able to do that? You know, when we look at the Auditor General's reports, one of the things is financial management, and I guess this is going to have to be a big thing.
No, it is. Well, as you'll be aware, if you don't grow an economy, you don't get more tax revenue. If you don't get more tax revenue, and you have limits in terms of how much you want to borrow and how much of interest you want to pay on your borrowings, then you've got to cap your expenditure. So we have an overall what we call expenditure ceiling, within which there's still R1 trillion. And so that's the one element. The second is that there's always room, whether it's the household budget or the national budget, for removing fat, for removing wastage, and for finding more focused ways of spending our money. That's what we're doing. Thirdly, we are going to demand more quality outcomes. So we talked about property leases. Government occupies lots of property all over the country, but a more recent forensic report is telling us that we're overpaying for some of that property. So we've got to get this balance right between private sector people who lease us their properties and ourselves, so that we get a fair price and therefore the taxpayers get a fair deal as well. On procurement, we want to make sure that we procure and get the best possible deal. You're not going to pay 20,000 rands extra for your car or 2,000 rands extra for your suit if you can get it at a lower price. That's what we intend to do and build on. We've done that on antiretroviral treatment, where we've saved 3 or 4 billion rands as a result of a different way of purchasing those. We want to now extend that to medical equipment, to aeroplanes, to Prasa locomotives, or whatever the case might be.
All right, Minister, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us. And I think a lot of people are waking up this morning with a bit of relief that we're not going to be paying too much more tax, but thank you so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. That was the Finance Minister, South Africa, Pravin Gordhan, talking to us about his budget speech yesterday. And we'll continue to unpack some of that with Labour analysts.